Hello everyone, my name is Sarafi and I'm happy to meet you all. And today we're going to talk about Viktor. I very much believe that Viktor is going to be the next champion added to Path of Champions in Legends of Runeterra. They've been pushing the Piltover and Zaun roster in preparation for Arcane Season 2 coming out in November. Viktor is not a new champion like Warwick, which, spoiler alert, we may be getting like Warwick or Singed or some other Piltover and Zaun champion added to the game as like a new card for the actual release of Arcane. That would be really cool because they're giving themselves a lot of time to prepare for this event. They're not releasing cards in October, like they're not upgrading champions in October. They gave us Caitlyn and Vi in August, so I don't think that, you know, they'll probably be done adding the cards they want to add to Path of Champions from the existing pool before Arcane comes out. So it could be that like the last thing is that they're going to add new cards to the game entirely for like the first time since April, which would be really hype. I especially would be excited to see Warwick in the game. Okay, but I think that Viktor is very likely to come to Path of Champions. Now, the important thing to note about Viktor is that he's broken. So, here's my ideas for what a Path of Champions constellation and deck could look like for Viktor, with the understanding that Viktor is inherently a very powerful card for the Path of Champions format. And let me explain why. So Viktor is a 4-mana 2/4 with Augment. The Augment keyword is when you play a created card, a card that did not start in your deck, you get +1/+0 to the augmented unit. And here's the problem. Created cards are like the entire point of Path of Champions. We've seen this with Aurelion Sol. Aurelion Sol's entire strategy focuses around created cards, and he's very, very powerful for that. Not only because his deck focuses around creating cards, but because every card that you could reasonably get in the Path of Champions draft, if it creates a card, it's going to be a better card than just a card that has some stats. Getting more value is much better for your deck overall. In addition to Viktor leveling up by creating cards, getting more powerful by creating cards, and all of his support followers having augment as well, he also has the ability, when I'm summoned or round start, create a Hex Core upgrade in hand. What is a Hex Core upgrade? It is a 0-mana fleeting slow spell that says grant Viktor a random keyword. Now, there are some keywords that you cannot add to Viktor with this card. Like, for example, you cannot get Deep, because Deep requires a very specific strategy to work. Similarly, you can't get Lurk, and you also can't get Evolve for some reason. I'm not actually sure why Evolve is excluded. But you can get, and you can't get Barrier either. That one's strange. I don't know why Barrier would be not allowed. But you can get Spell Shield, you can get Fearsome, you can get Brash, you can get Quick Attack. I don't think you can get Double Attack. Yeah, you can't get Double Attack either. You can get Quick Attack, you can get Overwhelm, you can get Elusive, you can get Deathless, you can get Lifesteal, you can get a few other really good ones. And of course, the main thing is, you know, you can't get the same keyword twice, so eventually Viktor will have Lifesteal. So basically, in the same way as with Morgana and Lux Illuminated, if you just wait for Lifesteal, you will be at full health at the end of every one of your fights, which basically removes any real challenge from the Path of Champions format. Because the real thing that makes Path of Champions difficult is not the individual fights. The individual fights aren't that bad. It's the grind. It's the climb. And so if you are able to very easily, without much effort, just a lot of time, get to 30 health, or 35 health, or 40 health at the end of every one of your fights, then you're not really going to struggle, especially against the Swain adventure. So Viktor is just inherently going to be a broken champion, in the same way that Morgana is inherently a broken champion. So with that in mind, I don't think that Viktor is a card that we should worry about balancing. I think that we should embrace Viktor's brokenness in the same way that we embraced Aurelion Sol's brokenness, and just have fun with it. Okay, here's Viktor's second form, by the way. 3/5 augment. Your created cards cost 1 less. That's insane. Absolutely absurd. Why does he do that? I have no idea, but there you go. So, Viktor, excellent card. Let's talk about what cards we could add to his deck and to his Constellation to make him a powerful contender for Legends of Runeterra Path of Champions. So, in Path of Champions, you start with a deck that has 18 cards. They all have to be the same region, and they all have to be, they all have to follow like a curve. So, this is what I think is most likely for Viktor I think this is what Riot will actually do. Because these cards basically all come from his tribe. So obviously you have 2 copies of Viktor. Next up, we're going to have 2 copies of Armed Gearhead. Armed Gearhead is a 1-mana 1/1 with Quick Attack and Augment. And for the item cards that we would get for Armed Gearhead, I have predicted that Armed Gearhead will get Giant Spelt. Giant Spelt is a common item that gives the unit equipped to it +0/+2. So Armed Gearhead would be a 1-mana 1/3 with Quick Attack and Augment. That makes it an extremely good unit to play on turn 1 because you can kind of grow the character slowly over time. And since he won't die to AoE effects, you can kind of just use the attacks, make sure that you get some good quick attack damage in. This is a very threatening unit, especially if you can get it overwhelmed. For the 2-star, we have the 2 cost. We have Ballistic Bot. Ballistic Bot is a 2-mana 1/3 with Augment, and Round Star create an Ignition in hand. Ignition is a 1-mana spell that deals 1 damage to the enemy nexus. So a Augment card that creates its own card to buff all your Augment cards is really, really solid. For the item card that I think Ballistic Bot will get, I believe it's going to be Studded Leather, which is a common item that just gives the unit +1/+1. A 2-mana 2/4 with an upside is very, very fair. And, Ballistic Bot isn't a particularly exciting card, just an effective card, so I think that it will be part of Viktor's deck, but not the focus. Next up, we have Chemtech Pickpocket. Now, this is a fun card. This is not an Augment card. It's a 2-mana 3/2 with Nexus Strike, create in hand an exact copy of a random spell from the enemy deck. So this is a card that will create more cards for you, but more importantly, these cards are going to be random. They're going to be like spells based on who you're fighting. Now that's the most exciting and fun card that you could play, which is why I think they'll really lean into this card. And I believe this is the first card that will get 2 item cards on it as you level up. The first item card is probably going to be a common card, and thinking about the common cards that are available, I feel like it will probably be Chain Vest, which gives the equipped unit Tough. I think that Chemtech Pickpocket as a 2-mana 3/2 with Tough that has Nexus Strike getting a benefit is really good for you. That means that basically your opponent will be pressured to try and block this card, but if they don't have 3 attack, it will survive, and you want to try and force your opponent to either block this card or give up some serious value. To make sure that the Nexus Strike actually happens, the second item card this gets should be Shadow Totem. When you play this card from your hand, you get a copy of it. 2 3/2s with Tough that have Nexus Strike create a random spell in the enemy deck will be really, really good. If your opponent only has 1 blocker, great. They can block the real one, kind of inflict a little bit of damage to it, maybe take it out, but then you get your card draw. You create a card, which buffs all your Augment cards. And Chemtech Pickpocket doesn't have Augment, so using it just as a one-off enabler of your Augment's really solid. Plus, it's fun. It's a cool card. Next up, we have Iterative Improvement. This card is already in Path of Champions, used by Echo. But, still, this is Viktor's card primarily. I don't feel like it's fair that Echo has it, to be honest. Viktor would definitely get this card. Pick a follower, create a copy of it in hand with +1/+1. So that's a really good effect. Creating cards is all of what Viktor cares about. And even though it's a unit that started in your deck, if you create it, then it will trigger Augment and other things like that. Really, really good. So I think that Iterative Improvement will get Tear of the Goddess, which is a rare item that makes the spell cost 2 less. Iterative Improvement costing 0 is really, really strong, sure, but it basically just draws you a card that you already have and gives you an extra copy of it as long as you can pay its mana cost. This will probably be one of the best cards in the deck, but it has the most synergy with Viktor, so I think that's fine. Next up, we have Trail of Evidence. Trail of Evidence is a 2-mana Piltover and Zon card that says create create and hand a random 2-cost card from your regions. It costs 0 mana this round. So you're spending 2 mana to get a 2 mana card, and it's a random card. This is not Manifest. It does not let you choose one of 3 options. It's completely random. And it is from your regions, which means that it won't always be a Piltover and Zon card, because you will probably get a support champion that is not Piltover and Zonian. And that makes the pool, controllable, but a little bit wide and varied. There's weird 2-cost cards. Like, for example, if you get Freljord, one of the 2-cost cards there is called Entreat. It's a burst spell that says draw a champion. That's not something that Piltover and Zon can do. Pretty useful. If you were in Noxus, then you might get Transfusion, which is deal 1 damage to an ally to give another ally +2/+2 this round. You could get a unit. Maybe you get maybe you're in Demacia and you get the Vanguard Defender that is like a 2 mana 2/2 with Tough, right? Like that would be interesting. And the card that you create is created by. So this card, even though this card, you're not paying any mana for it, you spent 2 mana to play the card from your deck, but you got a created card, which means that you get to trigger your augments, even though the card is random. It could be fun, and that's what this game is about. It's about RNG, so I like this. For the item card, I would think this would get Hextech Fabricator 1, which is, when it's played, grant your strongest ally a common item this game, which will be something like Studded Leather, or maybe Quick Attack, or Fearsome. The common items aren't too good, but I don't really feel like Trail of Evidence really needs that much power to begin with, so I kind of chose a weak common item for it to get, which there aren't too many items that spells can get anyway, so had to be kind of creative with that one. Next up, we have Neandroid. Neandroid is a 3 mana 1/3 with Augment and Elusive. Elusive, of course, means that it can only be blocked by Elusive and Sharp Sight units. Neandroid is an excellent card, very, very powerful for Viktor. And for the item card for this one, Neandroid is probably going to be one of your best units, so it should have one of the best items. So I think that Neandroid will get Phage, 2/2/2 rare item. So Neandroid would be a 3 mana 3/5 with Augment and Elusive. That's terrifying, especially when we look at my star powers that we're coming up with later. Neandroid will quickly become one of your most powerful units on the board, and it's unblockable. But that's fair. You want to win the game, and Neandroid is your key to winning the game. So, next up, we have Evil Imperfectionist. Evil Imperfectionist is a 4 mana 4/4 with, when I'm summoned, pick a card in hand, create 4 exact copies of it in your deck, and reduce their cost by 1. So she creates cards. Fair enough. We have a lot of cards that benefit from creating cards. This is a card that creates cards. Probably the worst card in the deck, but it follows a curve, and you need some 4-drops, so fair enough. I feel like for the item card, this will just get Speed Wraps, 4 mana 4/4 with Quick Attack. It's good enough. And then lastly, we have Mechanized Mimic, the best card in the Viktor archetype. This is a 5 mana 3/4 with Augment and Attack. Grant me all keywords on allies. So Mechanized Mimic is able to steal all of Viktor's keywords, and Viktor, of course, is getting a new keyword every single round. Very, very fun. You will usually have Mechanized Mimic attack, and it will have Elusive, Tough, Augment, maybe Quick Attack, probably Overwhelm, and a few other interesting keywords. Depends on how long Viktor's been on the board. So this is another card that I wanted to make sure got 2 item cards on it. And the 2 item cards that it got. So the first item card that I wanted to give her is Great Club. Most decks get Great Club at some point on one of their bigger units. Great Club gives Overwhelm. It's a good way for you to get lethal in the early game when you're only like level 7 and you don't really have that many good cards. So even though Mechanized Mimic can get Overwhelm from other champions later, it's great to just give her Overwhelm to start with so that she can act as the finisher that she's supposed to be. And then the other item card is the rare item card, which is going to be Nomad's Medallion. Nomad's Medallion reduces the cost of a card by 2, so Mechanized Mimic would be a 3 mana 3/4 instead of a 5 mana 3/4. That's very important. Mechanized Mimic is your key finisher card. Getting it down early is very important because it needs time to ramp up and when you are up against these 6.5 star enemies, you don't have a lot of time to really flex around, so you need a powerful deck right away. Okay, those are the starting deck cards and the item cards. Now let's talk about the Constellation. So, Viktor's rare power at the first star is called Function Over Form. Your augment triggers grant an additional +0/+1. This is very similar to Pike's power. I drew, my idea off of that. It's a really good idea, So augment will give +1/+1 instead of +1/+0, which will make your board a little bit more stable, a little bit more resistant to AoE, and a little bit better at blocking, which is very important. New materials, new improvement. Epic power, +1 starting mana at the start of the round. Add a fleeting upgrade to your hand that grants a random keyword to your strongest ally. This functions exactly like Hexcore Upgrade, except it works on any unit instead of just Viktor. That's pretty solid, pretty good little card there that'll just give you a random keyword at the start of the round. And it's a created card, so that means you'll just trigger all your augments. Pretty strong. Next up for the 3-star power, we have Function Over Form 2. Your augment triggers grant an additional +1/+1, which is very, very good. So now augment gives you +2/+1, strong, stable, consistent. And I am just now realizing that I did not pull up the 4-star power before the video. Hold on. There we go. Alright, the 4-star power is, of course, every time the 4-star power is like a power that already exists, that power, in this case, is evolution. Allies have +1/+1 for each of their keywords. This is probably the best power in the game. So, it's been controversial. I have had a lot of people on Reddit tell me that this is ridiculous, that I shouldn't do this, but this is Viktor's power. This power is what Viktor has when you fight him. It's for him. It doesn't make any sense for him to not have this power. It was his power to start with. Evolution is Viktor's entire theme. And yes, it's a lot of power to give someone just to stay on theme. You could play armed gearheads, the armed gearheads that what's his name, Jace gets. Maybe you do Wild Inspiration to give the created cards -1 cost. Whatever. This is the best one. This is the one that fits the most. This is the one that gives you the most power. You should be rewarded for having, a 4th star. You should have good stats. You should be able to fight a board of deadly units pretty easily. I feel like this is what's going to make it so that Viktor can actually start taking on those powerful, threatening enemies, in the weekly nightmares every single week, at 4 stars. I don't feel like you should have to pay money and spend 6 weeks getting a champion to 6 stars, especially when they just came out. Like, if Viktor's going to come out in September and you need to grind Viktor fragments until, you have like 400 or whatever to get his 6 star, that's what we need to do to actually play against the content that's coming out every week. That doesn't seem fair. So I feel like 4 stars should be when you really start to feel like you can actually do something, as opposed to with Caitlyn. 4 stars doesn't feel like you can do much of anything. I feel like Caitlyn was a huge disappointment, and I want to avoid that with Viktor, because Viktor is cool. I like Viktor in Arcane, and I like Viktor in Path of Champion and Legends of Runeterra. I feel like he could be really good in tradition if we just take it seriously and we don't hold ourselves back because the rest of the cast is bad. You can make good champions. We've seen it with Aurelion Sol. We've seen it with Swain. You just have to actually not be afraid to give power to a PvE format. It doesn't hurt anyone if it's not balanced. It's fine. Alright, next up we have the 6-star power. The 5th-star power is always going to be Mana Flow Gem, so you get an extra starting mana. The 6-star power. We must improve. We must evolve. Allies have evolve. Evolve, of course, is if you have 6 keywords over the course of the game, get +2/+2. And when allies attack, cast Glorious Evolution. Glorious Evolution is a very powerful effect. It is a 10 mana card. It's slow speed, and it says all the cards in your deck have augment. They are tech cards. They are created by Glorious Evolution, and they cost 1 less. So now, after you've attacked 1 time, All of your cards cost 1 less. They all have augment, which is excellent. And they all trigger augments, because they're now all created by Glorious Evolution. I went back and forth on what I wanted this to be. I thought maybe that it would just like generate a fleeting 0-cost evolution in your hand, but that felt like it was too much extra work. Like, well, like it's a slow spell, you know. Why not just trigger? It's not a big deal. And then you know, it's an interesting idea. There's no scout in Viktor, so you don't have to worry about triggering the effect twice. Viktor's not a character that's really good at rallying or anything like that. None of the powers have rally. You know, yes, you could randomly generate rally, but that's that's synergy. Who cares? So I feel like, you know, if you want the 6-star to actually, you know, give you a chance to start fighting against these powerful enemies that start with like 4 units that all have, you know, that are all like 4/8s or whatever. You know, you look at the Swain Adventure, you look at the 6.5 Weekly Nightmare, you know, you have to have a powerful effect that immediately gives you the board. And this does not. This does not immediately give you the board. It requires that you attack into an already established board. You'll probably lose your units, and then you'll probably take some damage on turn 2. But you know, now your board is starting to fill up. You already have like that makes your Mechanized Mimic now costs 2, right? Because now it's a 2 mana 3/4. So you could play your Mechanized Mimic, you could play like your Iterative Improvement, you could, you know, play one of your 1-drops for 0. You know, you can start filling the board up. You can start really pushing to try and get as much power as possible on the board, threaten your opponent, get a bunch of stats. You know, the fact that you have Evolve means that when you play a couple of units, they're all going to be huge. So really, this skill just kind of pushes you to actually take the board on turn 2 or turn 3. Which is necessary. It's really necessary for us to start dealing with all these dangerous enemies. I know that this seems like a lot of power creep, but it's not my fault. Riot has power crept the game at this point. I feel like, you know, the game has gotten a lot more difficult since they released Constellations, and we need to acknowledge that. We need to improve Constellations to make up for it. Okay. And then we have the Relic. I created a Relic, which is the Hex Core. Power. If I'm Viktor, your created cards cost 1 less. Okay, so some of them have power. If I'm this person, I start with 1 extra mana. I don't think that's necessary, and I don't think it's in flavor for Viktor to have extra mana. But basically, your created cards cost 1 less. So Viktor's leveled up ability already triggers, you know, from the start of the game if you are Viktor. And then if you get Viktor on the board, then it doubles, you know, whatever. Obviously, that's really, really good with the 6-star ability, which is intended. You know, if you have the 6-star and you have the Epic Relic, you should win the game. Very simple. And then round start, draw a created card. So this doesn't do much for non-Viktor characters, because you would have to create cards in your deck to even get the benefit, which there are a few champions that do this, like, but for the most part there aren't that many. But for Viktor, of course, once you've attacked once, then all of your cards are created, so you can just draw anything. So, yeah, solid. All right, so that is my thought process. Then, of course, then there's the rest of the Constellation. I have... where are they? Star of Bounty, +1 starting gold and +1 reroll. That's fine, you know, extra rerolls for your Viktor, and the Star of Bounty just doesn't do much to begin with. Star of Legends, your support champions have Tech Evolution. Tech Evolution is the card is created as Tech, and it has Augment. So all your support champions will have Augments, which makes sense for the, you know, for the deck. It's very similar to Pike. Star of Discovery, followers you acquire in an adventure have Tech Evolution. Sure, so, you know, continuing with the theme of your units have Augments. Obviously, the 6-star overrides all this, but the 6-star is not going to come way later than any of these. Star of Blessings. Hex Core upgrade has Stopwatch. Stopwatch is, of course, a burst speed. So Hex Core goes from being slow speed to being burst speed, which is very important. You could potentially get Spell Shield, and your opponent won't be able to respond to you getting Spell Shield, so really, really good. And then lastly, we have Star of Blessings. Death Ray Mark 1, Death Ray Mark 2, and Death Ray Mark 3 have Elixir of Skill. Death Rays are the spell card that is created when you hold Viktor in your hand while you have a Viktor on the board. Death Ray Mark 1 is a deal 1, shuffle Mark 2 into your deck. Mark 2 is deal 2, shuffle Mark 3 into your deck, and Mark 3 is deal 3. And The problem with them is that like they brick your hand, right? Because you're gonna like you shuffle them into the deck and then you draw them again, and then they're dead cards. Like they don't do much of anything. So Elixir of Skill gives you the ability to draw a card when you play them, so that you can get these traded by cards. You can get a little bit of benefit out of them. You can keep shuffling Victor back into your deck, but then you also get to draw real cards that you actually care about. So there you go. All right, that is my thoughts on the Victor Constellation, Victor deck, Victor powers. My name is Serafi. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I was thrilled to have all of you with me.